In this session, we have four segments. First will be an opening address by our CEO, Dr. Arunabha Ghosh. It will be followed by a context-setting presentation for the session. And then we will move to the panel discussion, and the last segment will be the question and answer. So without delaying it, may I now welcome Dr. Arunabha Ghosh for the opening remarks. Arunabha, over to you.
Thank you, Nitin, and good day to everyone. Thank you very much for joining, especially to the panelists, for joining this important conversation. I've known some of the panelists for some time, so it's delighted to at least see you virtually again. This is an important conversation because it's happening just a week and a half after the conclusion of the COP27 discussions on climate change. And as you all know, one has been this loss and damage funding facility. But ultimately, what is it that we are funding? We have to look at how we are building in the infrastructure and responding to the impending crises. I often use a very simple rule of thumb about resilience, which is how quickly we can bounce back. Because the climate crisis is going to impact us and our economies in many different ways. So we have to look sector by sector, how the crisis is going to impact, and also how in different geographies, for different economic activities, and with different kinds of financial and technical and human resources, we'll be able to bounce back as rapidly as possible. It is in this context that we want to have this conversation. For those of you who don't know CEW, the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water is one of the leading policy research institutions in Asia. And in doing our research, one of the things we've been focusing on a lot is actually the focus on assessing climate risks. We know already that to about 470 odd extreme weather events, but most of these have actually happened after 2005 compared to a 1990 to 2005 period. So the intensity and the frequency is, of course, increasing. As a result, we estimate at CEW, as a part of our ongoing work on a climate risk atlas for India, that about 75% of India's districts are already hotspots for extreme climate events. And about 80% of our population now lives in areas that are susceptible to extreme hydro disasters. Now, how do we respond to a situation like this when it comes to the issue of water and water security? As we know, climate change is going to exacerbate the situation. We estimate that most of the river basins in India will experience water stress in the near future, with per capita annual renewable water availability dropping under 1,700 cubic meters by 2025. The observed hydrological changes, therefore, then pose a significant risk, a climate-induced risk, and also an administrative, engineering, and governance risk to the issue of water. What this means is that when we look at the uses of water, let's start with agriculture. We expect a significant decrease in our paddy output. We've already witnessed this year, because of increased heat stress, a decline in our wheat output. But when we move beyond our agricultural sector, the use of water in industrial facilities, particularly in power plants, then becomes another source of stress. The use of water in delivering other types of services, including for household water availability, becomes a challenge, exactly at a time when India is pushing very strongly on connecting every household to water supply. Now, we've mapped these climate-induced vulnerabilities at a district level, and now we are doing it at a sub-district level. By identifying these vulnerabilities, we are able to then see what will be at a, say, at a block level or a village level, what kind of challenges we might face, how we overlay that with the economic activities in that region, and how do we pair that with the administrative capacity to respond to the crises. So in a way, what the sort of homework I'm posing before all of us is, it's not just the estimation of natural disasters or water related stress, but how do we understand that in the context of an evolving economic structure for what is already now the world's fastest growing major economy, and how does that then impact the evolution of the administrative structure to respond to these challenges, and of course keeping in all of this the community in mind. Therefore, the Water Security and Climate Change Conference comes at a very important time. And I hope that this conversation is just a start of the kinds of new types of collaborations that we can establish in not just making better assessments, but in building better resilience. That rule of thumb of bouncing back faster against the shocks that we are facing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arunabha, and it's a good context that you already set in. Now we move towards one presentation, which will just kind of provide a further kind of a move to the session, and then we'll be moving to the panel discussion. Can we have the presentation, please? So, as I informed, the session is about climate risk, water management, and sustainable agriculture. Yeah, it's moving. Before I go to the main part of the presentation, just a few things about Council on Energy, Environment, and Water. We are a leading policy think tank. We use data, integrated analysis, and strategic outreach, to explain or to, influence sustainable development. We work across three main focus areas to drive transformation. One is to drive transformation, and this is we do through our work in low carbon economy, energy transitions, markets, industrial sustainability, and sustainable livelihoods. Now, all these impacts livelihoods are the quality of the life, and therefore we also research in the area of clean air, sustainable water, food system, cooling, and mobility. And we look at the enablers. I mean, how the transformations and the quality of life, can be enabled by doing research on the areas of sustainable finance, technology, circular economy, climate resilience, and international cooperation. We are about 200 plus researchers who are executing these three broad verticals. We have already convened many conferences and roundtables to drive the whole sustainable agenda. We have presence in 22 Indian states where we work closely along with the government through various channels, through various modes. And we have, many of the publications that are available, that are in public domain. If you want, you can just go to our website and access them. Well, as Arunava also mentioned, what has happened is that if we look at the world scenario, so what we find is that between 2001 and 2018, 74% of the natural disasters were water related. And we look specifically at Asia, so this is where the maximum number of disasters have happened. I mean, they are close to 2000 plus that you can see happening in Asia. So, I mean, in India, China alone, maximum number of disasters have happened. One of the work that we did, I mean, basically to capture the hotspot of extreme events in India and to also look at the vulnerability. What we did, we uh, accessed the data, last 50 years data between 1970 and 2020. What we see is that already more than 75% of the districts in India, they bear the brunt of or they experience extreme weather events. Now here we have considered droughts, floods and cyclones. These are also the districts which are home to 80% of the population. So 75% of the vulnerable areas to hydromet disasters are also home to almost 80% of the population. Not only this, what is interesting to also see is that there is a lot of inversion or a swapping trend. So the areas which were traditionally experiencing drought now have experiencing floods, and the areas where the flooding was occurring, now they are also having drought. Even this year, if you see, in the Indo-Gangetic belt, this year the rainfall was below 40% of the long-term average. And in Rajasthan, which is traditionally a drought-prone zone, so there the rainfall has increased by 40%. So these are the kind of inversion trends that we are actually facing on a yearly basis. In terms of water stress, we have 20 river basins as demarcated by our national agencies, and what we find is that by 2025, almost all the river basin will be experiencing water stress, except for Brahmaputra, Narmada, and other eastern basin. So this is the situation that we find we have to deal with. Now, what it does, so one is that the existing stress that we are undergoing, we are experiencing extreme climate events. Then, of course, we are, kind of also experiencing water stress in different basins. And what climate change is expected to do, this is specific to India that we got, some of these data sets from the IPCC report. What it says is that in Ganga and Brahmaputra basin alone, there will be increased flooding, and some 3.5 crore people would face annual coastal flooding. So this is the scale of climate change driven disasters that we can expect in future. Paddy production and maize, of course, these are lifeline. Paddy, wheat, maize, they are the main cereals which are grown in India. And what we find is that there will be a decrease in their production if the current level of increase in the temperature continues. Urbanization will grow. Many urban areas will also experience domestic water shortage, because of the urbanization, the domestic water demand itself will increase. Drylands, especially drylands in the urban zone will increase because they will be experiencing kind of a various kind of a droughts. And in any ways, even now in many of the urban cities in India, water is a big challenge. You are unable to get the water when you need it. Recent example in Delhi, this year when there was a time when there was no flows in river Yamuna, so even Delhi was struggling to meet its water demand. Now, what we can do? This is the scenario that we are dealing with. So what are the things that we can do? Of course, one is that we are already developing a climate risk atlas, which Arunabha also mentioned while he gave the opening talk. Apart from this, we are also exploring, how water accounts and water balance can be used as a, let's say, a tool to take or improve decisions concerning water management. And here we say that, it is not only about the estimation of water account and water balance, but also developing scenarios using water accounts and water balance and coming out with the water account drive indicators, which can be monitored from year to year, so that we also understand what is the impact of various interventions that can be seen in a basin. So this is an example of a basin in eastern India, Mahanadi River Basin, which experiences kind of a water deficit under reference or a business as usual scenario. But we also found that there are a lot of outflows which goes from the basin. So there is a scope that some of these outflows can be tapped and supplied and reduce the deficit. But then we have also developed different scenarios to see how much of this deficit remain, even if we take some water conveyance efficiency improvement intervention, we go for cropping pattern changes, we improve the capacity of the reservoir itself. So such kind of exercises are very important when we look at the climate extremes, and when we talk about the water stress that different river basins are already experiencing. Now we would like to move further in the granularity of it, where my colleague Konkanika will explain a bit on how we are looking to assess these impacts at the local scale, especially in the agriculture sector, which is a major consumer of water in India. Konkanika?
Thank you, Nitin. I'm working with the SFS team, Sustainable Food Systems team at CW. We are working to transform India's agro-food system. One of the biggest gap that we are trying to address is on the data and information side, and how this could effectively transform decision making, especially by providing pathways for transformation, which is required for the food systems transition. Nitin talked about how data and information and models can inform us about climate variability and water availability. I'll quickly explain to you. What I Thank you. What I'll quickly talk to you about is this project that we are doing, where we are looking at ground level impact data across 3 states of Orissa, Bihar, and UP. And what we're doing through this project is trying to see how existing and ongoing interventions, and in the context of agricultural climate adaptive water management, is trying to impact on 3 or 4 major outcomes. One is climate resilience, second, food security, third, improve lives and livelihoods, and fourth, sustainable natural resource management. We carried out a systematic review methodology to understand the influence of these interventions on different impacts. And what you can see here is the quality of evidence that we have gathered. We looked at almost 60 studies to start with. As you can see, we have almost 67% medium or high quality studies, which means that there was some sort of causation and correlation. In the high quality studies, there is also a causation with the intervention and outcomes. Most of the studies that we saw were from Orissa and Bihar. We had less number of studies from Uttar Pradesh. You can also see that the frequency of studies have gradually increased over the years, naturally so because adaptation has been in focus more so in the recent decade. This is an evidence gap map that we created using the data. This tries to give you a bird's eye view of what is happening and the interactions between different types of intervention and their impacts. EGMs are usually visual and intuitive, and helps us highlight the gaps that are there in evidence and also tell us where the evidence is abundant. The red, it's going from red to green, which means from low count to high count. As you can see here, nature-based solutions are contributing to better food system outcomes much evidently and abundantly, compared to something like policy laws and regulations, which is quite red here. So going forward, there is need to focus on the ones which are red, and continue to focus on the ones which are providing impact on the food systems and other outcomes that you can see here. But what I want to particularly highlight is how there is a big necessity to report on climate-related outcomes going forward. After all, what we can measure is potentially what we can manage. In line with this, we're trying to understand how climate vulnerability, how the climate context interacts with these interventions. We also try to overlay this information on at district level with the climate vulnerability map that Nitin had talked about in one of the slides earlier. Again, reiterating, my colleagues at CW developed this climate vulnerability index map at a district level. They looked at exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. So we overlaid this information with the locations of the interventions that we studied. And what is interesting is that there is very low overlap between areas which are highly vulnerable to floods and droughts and areas where the interventions, the drought or flood-related interventions which actually happen. So going forward, future interventions should be better targeted in areas where climate vulnerability is high. So with this, I'll hand this over to the mic over to Nitin. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Konkanika, for presenting the work that we are doing at the granular scale. Now we move, I think I still need the presentation. Yeah, thank you. So now we will move to the panel discussion where we would like to, achieve two things. One is that, of course, we have presented some specific approaches that we are taking in order to assess the climate risk at various scales, looking at water resource management by using different tools, and then also looking at climate resilient agriculture practices. So we would like to know from the panel, the rich experience that our panelists have, to understand, how, these assessments, how these assessments that are being done at different scales can be used to prepare communities towards resilience, how we can increase their resilience in the face of climate change that they are going to face in future. And the other, which is very important aspect, is how we can even mainstream the climate risk consideration into efforts on providing water and food security that can lead to benefit towards society, economy, and environment. With this, now I would like to invite the panelists. So we have Ms. Henriette Frigeman. She's first counselor with the European Union delegation to Indonesia. And I think she is online. So can we have her projected on the screen? Henriette, you may please switch on your camera. Thank you.
Yes, can you see me?
Yes, we can see you. Thank you. We have with us Dr. Anik Bahaduri. He is the Executive Director, Sustainable Water Futures, and professors at Australia Rivers Institute, Griffith University. Anik, if you can please join us on the dais. Next, we have Professor Dr. Cecilia Torteeda. She was also there as a keynote speaker, and she has kindly agreed to be a panelist on our session. She is a professor in practice, School of Interdisciplinary Studies, University of Glasgow. Welcome, Professor Cecilia.
Thank you, Nitin.
Next, we have Professor Dr. Mukund S. Babel, professor at Water Engineering Management, Asian Institute of Technology, and he doesn't need any introduction. He's behind organization of this conference. So, Professor Babel, you are also most welcome on the dais. We have Dr. Somaya Shatkam, who works as an irrigation specialist with FAO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. You may please join on the dais. And last but not the least, I would invite my colleague Konkanika to join the panel as well. Before we start, just few rules. We have divided this panel discussion into 3 rounds. The initial round will be a 3 minutes intervention based on the specific questions that we will be asking. Round 2 again would be a kind of a quick fire round where you are allowed to take 1 to 2 minutes to answer that. And round 3 will be a 1 sentence closing remarks. So now we are starting with round 1 and I will start with Henriette. Henriette is at the international diplomacy level, first in India, for good 5 years, and now I see that you are in Indonesia. again driving some of the climate-related interventions there. Uh, what you see that has climate risk become a mainstream element for water resource management and planning? And the second is, in your opinion, recently there was an agreement on loss and damage fund for the developing nations. So could you see that this fund may drive South and South Asia to tackle climate risk and manage water better in the coming years? Over to you. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Nitin. I hope you can hear me clearly. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to be here. I'm sad I can't be with you in person, but it's good to be here nonetheless. So first of all, I think it's safe to say yes, climate risks are really being more and more mainstreamed into water management. And also, I think there's more and more awareness that clean and healthy water-related ecosystems are really crucial for both sustainable development and for climate action. Water-related ecosystems and services are crucial not only for the SDG 6, as we know, but actually for the entire 2030 agenda and also for other global commitments under the Paris Agreement, under the Convention for Biological Diversity, the Convention for Combating Desertification, and others. Of course, there is more that can be done to ensure that climate mitigation and adaptation considerations, that co-benefits and trade-offs are properly integrated in medium and long-term water management plans. And the other way around, more can of course be done to ensure that essential aspects of water resources management are integrated into national adaptation plans, to NDCs and disaster risk reduction strategies, among others. Right now, as we heard, we are just after COP26 and we are just before COP15, Biodiversity COP15. And I think it's really important to highlight that we really hope that this conference will also send some important signals in terms of how the links between the 2020 global biodiversity, post-2020 global biodiversity framework is important also for achieving the water-related targets. Of course, we do need more efforts to protect and sustainably manage ecosystems and natural resources, including wetlands, and really promote the key role that ecosystem and ecosystem services play in maintaining water quality and quantity. We also need to significantly reduce water pollution, improve water quality. We need to improve water efficiency, reduce water losses. We need to overall step up in implementation of integrated water resource management from local to transboundary level, covering both surface and groundwater and water quality and water quantity. And we need really to promote tools to improve strategic planning and policy in the context of climate change, for example, by using ecosystem service accounting. And we need to accelerate decarbonization in water-related sectors. So in order for all these things to happen, to keep happening, to happen more, we need to integrate water-related objectives into climate and biodiversity finance and the other way around. And this brings me to the second part of your question, the new fund that was agreed at COP27 with a focus on addressing loss and damage. For the European Union, it's crucial that this fund will focus on assisting the most vulnerable countries. And I think we can all agree, and we heard it very clearly in the introductory presentations, that South and Southeast Asia are among the most vulnerable parts of the world. The new arrangement and this fund will build on the existing mosaic of institutions that are currently providing assistance to developing countries in preparing for and responding to climate impacts, and it will seek to fill the gaps in this mosaic. The fund is designed to provide assistance and not a compensation, and the design of the funding arrangement will include identifying and expanding sources of funding while recognizing the need for support from a wide variety of sources, and that includes also innovative sources. And this is really what I want to end with. This is the first time a process is set up under the UNFCCC that has the mandate to explore sources of support beyond the conventional donor base of developed country governments. So yes, we do believe in the EU that this fund will be very helpful for better linking water management and climate action.
Thank you, Henriette, for these insights based on your association and work in the field. We take note of the things which you just mentioned, and I will come back to you. Now I move to Anik. He has been in various roles first with EMI, then at University of Bonn, then now he's with the Griffith University. And he has been part of many innovations that have happened in the water and the food security sector. So, Anik, I mean, acknowledging that such innovations have played a major role, what do you think about the digital water management as a new age solution? And what impedes progress towards digitalization, especially in the context of developing countries?
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I will start with the concern we have right now. And the concern is the change we are seeing it is taking place so fast. Yeah. So the agricultural production risk is increasing, and the same farmer, who is facing drought, within few months he is facing flood, and some of the cities are rapidly facing water scarcity. So, as I said in the morning, the global change, which includes the economic change, the social change, and the climate change, is interacting, and very dynamically, very fast. So, if we look at the scientific models to predict it, they have reached the dead end. With the only relying on scientific models, we cannot do the right forecasting. Yeah. Because lots of data is there, there are missing variables are there, and there's digitalization, with use of artificial intelligence algorithms. We need to merge several kinds of data, semi-structured data with deep learning, cloud computing, where digitalization, an innovative combination of digital tools and scientific models could be a game changer here. Yeah, there are so many instances. First instance is estimating the water balance. Yeah, where in many countries where we don't have data, where global models can predict. Yeah, and it needs to be validated with the local data, in situ data, and the combination of it, the digital tools can really facilitate the manage of the two kind of data. So even if you look back along the value chain, for understanding the food prices are increasing, the farmers face uncertainty in food prices, and they don't know what to do, and where the smart agricultural tools, those kind of things, incorporating the food prices, incorporating informations on weathers and so on, can really help farmers to make decisions under risk and uncertainty. So I think it really is a game changer, but there are a lot of limitations. One basic limitations is capacity development, particularly in developing countries and underdeveloped countries. So where if we have some kind of a digital architecture that can provide as a public good and and help those countries to leapfrog, for better planning and management. And there are other limitations which we can discuss later on. I don't want to
Yeah, thanks, Anik, for this useful insight based on your experience. I now move to Professor Cecilia Tortejeda. I mean, we all know the kind of experience you bring on board with your work in various continents and countries. Given that you have worked in these various geographies, what is the water future you envision based on the experience that you have working with different governments, different countries? And do you feel that there are enough pieces of evidence for developing climate resilient water system? I know in the keynote you referred to some of them, but it will be good to again hear it from you.
Thank you, Nitin, and thank you for the invitation to participate in the panel today. We tend to think in terms of climate change because it is the most important stressor now. However, for any city to establish systems that can be resilient or that can adapt to the changes that are happening because of climate change, we need to have robust systems to start with. So we know, and there have always been droughts and floods, except now they are lasting longer and they are more intense. And we know that we will have low flows, reduced water levels, higher temperatures, reduced groundwater tables, lower availability for all users, for example. Now, in the case of the floods, we know that our water resources are going to be polluted, and we know that we're going to have basically less options. Are we planning for the damage to infrastructure? And what can we do? Because there are countries that every year are affected for floods, and you don't see the transition to stronger institutions. Yes, there are plans, but you don't see this implementation at a larger scale, not because it's not complex, but because it is necessary. And so what would be our climate resilient water systems? Will it be those that you know that you will have less water in some times of the year? So does that mean you have to allocate your water differently? And that would mean that you may not bring a refinery, even if it brings many jobs, to a place where you shouldn't have a refinery because you have already over-allocated the water in your basin. And that may mean, like in places in Mexico, in China, in Peru, in India, that you don't grow crop-intensive crops, you don't grow crop-intensive crops because you don't have the water to do it. And I'm not talking about the virtuality of water, I'm talking about factual things. And that may also mean that you have to protect your water resources better. Tokyo is an excellent example. New York is another example where they protect their watersheds. Or our sheds in the developing countries, they are in very bad state, not only because of deforestation, but because of environmental deterioration. Do we have to establish longer-term policies as Singapore has done, as California has done with the Groundwater Act, that, by the way, was not able to implement because of the drought this year? And also in terms of, if we think about this climate resilience is many blocks, and it is about robustness, it is about the planning, about having our assessments, developing, building relations with your community, as it happens, for example, in Panama, during the hurricane season, the people who manage the canal, they know who are the people they would have to go and save, so they go and talk with them beforehand. Are we training our people, not only the people of our utilities, but the population? And talking in this regard is excellent because they have this long-term training, not training, but education to the population. People know what to do if there is a typhoon. People know which direction to go and not to go in order to save their lives. And many large areas have been built for that. So are we planning for the responses, for the recovery, for the surveillance? So again, this climate resilient water system depends on robust systems that we still don't have in the developing world. And it depends on long-term planning, on which we all have to start working, not only the developing countries, but to be strengthened by developed countries. That would be my comment.
Thank you so much for these insights, Professor Cecilia, and we'll come back to you, Professor Babil. We have all been following your work, and and the kind of frameworks, different frameworks you have been coming out with to assess water security, to assess, how to make systems resilient. And not only these frameworks, but you have been also engaged with using a lot of spatial data and undertaking a lot of hydrological modeling studies. Considering all this, what do you see as resource modeling, particularly that you are doing, and of course the various frameworks that you have been engaged in developing with? Do you think that this plays an critical role to drive on-ground changes in the sector, and how you see that your research can actually, make that change?
Okay, thank you. The question is quite broad in the sense that I need to speak for 30 minutes. But you have given me 3 minutes. Um, I think understanding climate risk is important, and to me, how do we define that risk to the local people or a system, whether it's agriculture system or water system, and there will always be a risk. So we cannot be risk free. What is the level of risk we are able to manage? So that's the one point we should keep in mind. Second point, with respect to resource modeling, with respect to my viewpoint is, these are tools which can help understanding the system, whether it's water accounting or whether we are doing a hydrologic modeling. This will give us a kind of a frame to understand what is happening. Now, I would rather argue that we should look from the approach which brings both bottom up and top down in terms of understanding when it comes to climate and climate risk, because future is uncertain and we are dealing with uncertainties. Can we look at how the systems are at risk or communities are at risk and try to see how those risks can be reduced, right? And we have been working now on this approach called climate risk informed decision analysis, this CRIDA approach. We have applied it to various water domestic water systems in Bangkok, in Colombo, in Kenya, Nairobi. There are a lot of places we have. So that's the kind of an approach, and we are now currently applying it in agriculture sector, seeing that how a farmer sees the risk from the climate, how agricultural department look at it, how irrigation department look at it, who are supplying water to the agriculture sector, and what our climate science is telling us. Understanding this would help defining the decision context, defining the risk level, where do we would like to invest in order to kind of, as I said earlier, to reduce those risks. Okay? For first round,
Yep.
enough, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much for identifying how different stakeholders play a crucial role when it comes to even defining climate risk and then building on and not understanding that how to tackle it. So thank you so much. I now move to Somaya. I just happened to attend her presentation in the previous session, where she rightly highlighted the role of irrigation, especially in the South Asia region, and how the water energy nexus plays an important role. Somaya, considering that climate is going to be more uncertain, how do we ensure that on one side, of course, we have to address the nexus part, but then the food security is also an important component that needs to be taken care, because many a times the suggestions which flows, deals with crop diversification, it may be, moving to a crop where you might end up, let's say, affecting your food security. So considering all this, would you like to throw some light on it? How at FAO, your work, your research and working maybe with the community, with the farmers, are actually driving efforts towards ensuring food security, but at the same time addressing the nexus aspect as well?
Thank you for your good question. as we all know, climate change can impact irrigation in different ways. Availability, not only quantity but timing. It can impact demands by increasing evapotranspiration, and this all brings a lot of uncertainty. Can we ensure is farmers that in any way that you have enough water or on time? No, we cannot, but we can help them. We can help that they understand what they can expect and be prepared for that. In FAO, we plan to develop science-informed adaptation strategies for farmers that nowadays we can use much more reliable data from remote sensing and much more advanced models that we can they can tell even in remote places how much water we will have available and what we can expect, how growing season will be changed. But what very recently in FAO we plan to do that we couple these models with agroecological zoning models that, as you said, also we understand how much different irrigation scenario we offer to farmers impact yields, impact their income, because otherwise it will be not sustainable. They will not follow our plan if we jeopardize their income. So, so one of the very recent work that FAO is doing, this state-of-art modeling, and the result, as Anik mentioned, that can be used in digital form, apps for farmers. But what we shouldn't forget that none of this gonna work if we don't involve farmers from very beginning, and we should develop all of this adaptation strategy and all of this science and modeling, what they are prepared for, what is their demand. So with them in a participatory approach, we use this science-informed, evidence-based strategy and help farmer not only prepare for what they can expect in terms of water in agriculture, but also ensure that they can keep their yield and their income. I can go much further, but yeah, I think it's enough.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, highlighting the evidence base, or evidence for taking on certain intervention. And this takes me to Konkanika, who just presented on her work, where she's trying to find the evidence based on the existing literature, and trying to understand how it is being done across various geographies in India. Kankanika, based on your research and the evidences which you showed, what do you think are the factors that are driving climate smart agriculture practices, let's say, and what are the adaptation farmers are able to do, let's say, on their own or with the support of external agencies like government or development agencies?
Thank you, Nitin. Yeah, I'm drawing my experience from the project that I talked about a while back. I can see several factors that are coming up again and again, which is driving to the adoption and success of sustainable agricultural practices and water adaptation. Let me present them to you in a bottom-up approach, which is something very common that's going on in what we are discussing today. Number one is community participation, involvement, and ownership. It's key. These are driven usually by capacity building, training, and awareness generation programs in these interventions. For example, endorsement by of an intervention by a key individual from the village, for instance, a village champion, or a participatory institution like a water user association, actually is helping farmers gain that confidence to take up these interventions. Also, community involvement and participation was a key element which was driving long-term sustainability in the projects that I looked at. Secondly, building robust market linkages is another critical factor. access to local and nearby markets for easy access of not just seeds and inputs, but also for creating that demand for the crops or produce, right? Additionally, we also saw that having value addition units or post-processing units in these at the local level actually gives farmers the confidence to take up new interventions which could potentially give a different produce or crop, right? Together, these two, capacity building and market linkages, actually could drive the demand towards newer and more nutritious food crops. Third is what I want to present here is innovative and effective partnerships. In some cases, we saw how the presence of an active local partner helped adoption. Government buy-in endorsement was also very critical and key to the success of a particular intervention. And lastly, there is need to explore coherence between different policies and schemes which that could drive effective convergence between different schemes that have linked objectives. This also enables cost sharing of for different activities. So overall, I'm presenting 4 points from the evidence review work. One is capacity building is crucial, market linkages needs to be created, innovative partnerships needs to be explored, and finally, policy coherence.
Well, thank you so much. I think we already have a lot of points to discuss. And now I move to the second round where it's a common question to all the panelists, and we expect around 1 to 1.5 minutes to answer it. So now you have heard each other. I mean, you have your own experiences. We would like to know that if we have to ensure water and food security, given the increasing climate variability and the climate change induced risk that might happen, where do you think are the areas which need strengthening? Are these areas related to improving in governance? Are these related to improving data and information, financing, innovation, capacity development, or all of them? I will again go back to Henriette first. Henriette?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Nitin. Yeah, I actually thought it was a trick question. I definitely think that all of these areas are really challenging and do need strengthening. Of course, we need proper governance structures to make sure that we can manage water in a holistic, cross-sectoral river basin approach. I think that became clear from all that we have discussed today. We need data and information to do a proper assessment of the water status, of the pressures and impact, and to identify appropriate measures. We need innovation to create the most cost-effective measures, and we need financing to implement them. And all of that cannot happen without capacity building, obviously. So let me just do a little bit of advertising. The European Union's Water Framework Directive does exactly that. It has established a 6-year cycle that goes through all these steps, including also a strong stakeholder involvement, what we heard in the previous intervention. We have completed already the second 6-year cycle by the end of last year, and we've gained really a lot of lessons learned that we are sharing with partner countries, including in this region. The first such partnership we concluded was the one that you and I worked together on between the European Union and India. And I think we agreed that a lot of lessons can be shared from that, including how to bring policymakers, private sector, researchers and financiers together around the same table to manage water. Thanks.
Well, very interesting. I was expecting that such a response will come, so that was why it was not specified in the questions shared with the panel. Moving to Anik. Well, Anik, we have heard that you wanted to focus on the data and information aspect, but you are free to add other aspects as well.
Yeah, I think the tick box you have, the first one is governance. You're right. the most challenging task is to set up the institutions, governance structure. That is very, very important, without which whatever mentioned, digital tools and all these things, it will not work, as you said. Yeah, the tools are ready. Yeah, easily. There are so many ready-to-use tools, but the governance settings, institutions, that is not ready. So that is the biggest. Then the following that is the capacity development in those regions. Capacity can be developed if there is enabling conditions in the governance setups. So I will say that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I now move to Professor Cecilia for sharing her views on this.
Yes, I also agree and I support that the most important element is governance. We all have been mentioning those areas on which we work. And just by mentioning them, we ourselves were thinking, well, this is not working. This doesn't work in certain parts of the world or within certain cities, within certain countries, or why not? And that would be the next step. We do need governance because, as Anik says, the rest are tools. But if we don't go back, if we don't see from a broader perspective and we don't see why the situation is not working, then we won't be able to fix our governance. We won't be able to strengthen it.
Well, thank you so much. And now I move to Professor Babil, and please.
Yeah, I think I do agree with all these three speakers before me, but I can summarize in a different way. There are, I call them 3 E's and 3 P's, right? So 3 E's of IWRM, basically. Enabling environment. You need enabling environment. This is one pillar, right? The second pillar is institutional roles, institutional arrangements. And the third pillar is your management instruments. So management instruments of your data, your capacity development, innovation is part of, right? So basically, if we can look around these three broad areas of creating an enabling environment, which would include your regulation, your policies, law, setting up them in a right direction, and institutions, as rightly said by Anik and Cecilia, and then you need management instruments and n number of management instruments, including your modeling, your data, your information. So if we can organize them in a way to achieve food security or water security. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So Maya, you spoke about involving stakeholders, and so that gives me an impression that you are more in favor of capacity development. Your thoughts?
I think, yes, you are more or less right. As a person that worked years as a scientist and then moved to implementation part, an agency like FAO, I should admit that gap is really big. Gap between science, data, information, and what we implement is really big. And I remember I was helping a committee to rescue Urumia Lake in west of Iran, that it is shrinking. And when I talked to them, they told me, we know everything, but we cannot implement it. We told people that please don't use groundwater, but of course they don't listen to us. We give them loan to develop their irrigation efficiency, to enhance, but they make a mafia and they use this money for other things. And so I agree with other panelists that we really need to enhance governance, but also none of them can happen without capacity development. But also I want to highlight finance. We need a mechanism, a financial mechanism to support farmers, to support a stakeholder for transition time. If we tell them, okay, go for agroforestry, but it takes time, it takes years, but how they can continue without without having a financial mechanism to support them. So I would go for these three options.
Thank you so much for your impression. Konkanika, I think your job is made a bit easier because you wanted to talk about finance, innovations, and I think capacity building.
You're right. I want to, with the caveat that I agree with all of you, and I think all of the factors are important, very important. But I would specifically want to highlight innovations, especially the role of agri, because I'm working in the agri space at the moment, agriculture, water startups, and highlighting their presence in a more focus, in a more, in the forefront. In this context, there are certain limitations at the moment, especially in India. We need to provide them with entry points so that they could come up and do pilots and even upscale projects. In this regard, maybe easing the enabling environment a bit, especially the tendering process, etc., to enable them to come up in the forefront will be critical. So innovation, but all of the above as well. Thank you.
Nice. So now we can move to the last round, which is really a quick fire round. At CW, we really believe in developing partnerships, collaboration, and moving forward. Even when it comes to doing research, we work a lot with different stakeholders. Given that perspective in mind, Henriette, I would like to ask you. So, what is that one thing which you would like to suggest moving forward from here that we can look for collaboration, especially looking at your work? Or whatever medium that you would like to be part of the endeavor that we are in, to ensure that the water and the food security is achieved. So this is common to all the panelists, and we look forward to hearing what sort of collaborative instrument we can have and in which direction we can move from here. Henriette?
No, I already hinted to it in my previous reply. I think the idea of creating partnerships that really are cross-sectoral, that brings government, businesses, financing institutions, researchers, innovators together, and really try to see this in a holistic way and bring perspective to everything, bring everything into the same plate is the most crucial right now.
Yeah, thanks. Anik, I understand that you also have kind of a interest, especially given that India is also taking over the G20 presidency now. So how you see things moving forward?
Yeah. I will mention few gaps. Yeah, 3 gaps, and then I will say where partnership is needed. Okay. One gap: we are too much problem oriented. We need to be solution oriented. There is where the investments are taking place, may not be the major problems. Yeah, and where the major problems are, the solutions are not there. So we need that kind of linkage between problems and solutions. There's a huge science policy divide, and where exactly your think tank can play a fundamental role, in connecting with the policymakers, where I see that as enabling conditions there. So the third point is I see is a big gap with research and implementation. Yeah, and because we are academicians, we cannot implement. That's not our cup of tea. Yeah, and that's where a largest UN organizations like FAO, where I've worked for the last 2 years, they can really help in uptake that things and what is feasible and feedback to us, and we can work on that. So that's, I think, where I see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well. Thank you so much, Professor Cecilia. You were recently in India, and I understand you might have got a chance to speak to a lot of the administrative and bureaucrats. What is your kind of a take on what should be the next step which India should be taken, and we can collaborate on the same?
I think a very important, let me also focus on gaps. A very important gap that needs to be addressed is the communication between sectors. We continue talking, people working in the water sector continue talking to people in the water sector, and that is a lost opportunity. So we study energy and food, everything from the point of view of water, which is, as a result, very narrow. We have to start talking with other sectors. And it doesn't depend, as Anik says, policy making doesn't depend on us, but it depends on us, the research and the frameworks, by working with different sectors. I think that only talking about water is more than enough and more than boiling. We have to go to the next step. And I think your institution can do very well there.
Well, thank you so much. Professor Babil, what are your views? I mean, I know you have been engaging with different institutions in India, and given your kind of a presence across various boards and the networks that operate worldwide, what India can learn or what India should be collaborating based on your experiences?
I think key to development is innovation. So innovation, and then the other points which have been already raised or already mentioned, that the role of we being from the academic institutes, as I said in my brief speech yesterday also, that the role of universities has to change. They cannot do the research only. They have to go for research for development, research for impact, research for innovation, and that is the key to me. The universities must change, especially on those specific, resource-based approaches. So we can play a role in this whole spectrum of innovation and capacity development, and I would like to emphasize on what I call 3L now. 3 P's, 3 E's and 3 L's, and this 3L means lifelong learning. So can universities play a role of lifelong learning, or can we move towards more transdisciplinary approaches to research and education, which is started to happen. I can see the last 30 years of education sector especially. Now things are happening, but I think we should move faster to address those challenges which we have. And challenges will always remain there, because we have a saying that today's solution is tomorrow's problem. So even Anik says that we should go towards solution, but I can tell you that most of the time our solutions are short-sighted, and they bring to a new problem. So how do we really analyze? And I come back to the saying again, that you remember this saying that if I have 1 hour, I would spend 55 minutes understanding the problem, and I will spend 5 minutes to find the solution. So I believe in that we do not analyze problems properly. Most of the time we want to find a quick fix, and that creates the problem. And there are many examples.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And actually, this is what we even do at CEW, that we do spend a lot of time in actually framing the problem and even to decide on the methods, the approach, before going ahead full scale with our studies. So this is very wise, and we take note of it.
Yeah, but bring in the stakeholders, bring in the people to this problem is most important too. Talk to them, which we do not do. And researchers, of course, at one time research, when I did my PhD, I didn't talk to anybody. And I did my PhD. Okay? So that was the time about 30 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Somaya, I again come back to you for the final comment. I understand that FAO is having a water security or a water scarcity program for the southeast countries. So any such plans to enter into the broader South Asia level and also influence it? Maybe that also answers, how the collaboration can move towards other countries, other institutions.
Yes, as I mentioned, actually there are so many research we are doing how we can, for example, use nature-based solution, how we can use science-informed adaptation strategy. But as I mentioned, that the most recent one, it's that we are trying to coupling hydrological model with agroecological zoning modeling, just to find optimal solution for farmers. We cannot tell them just what they should use as irrigation scenarios, but we should ensure them their yield and their income. But what I wanted to mention and add to the other panelists said, we also the message we want to tell the policymaker that as a UN agency, that don't distract by there is a lot of uncertainty in climate change and these kind of things, because we should see the whole picture. Climate change is happening, and any water resource management, any irrigation plan, they are not robust to climate change. So when I talk to policymakers, I see they still even didn't see the whole picture. They didn't see that it's already happening, this already flooding, there is drought, and they are not prepared for that. So we want to say, beside all of our research plan, beside all of this scenario assessment, we should really have more communication with policymaker and, as Professor Babel said, stakeholder. And this is what we really, FAO get on the ground, go to the field to talk, to have honest discussion with farmers and with policymaker to get this agreement.
That's a nice suggestion to bridge the gap, not only between the science and what we influence at the policy scale, but also going a level down and also interacting with the let's say the end user in this case, who is affected the most. Konkanika, my last request to you would be a little different, because you are from CEW, so I cannot ask you about the collaborative part, but it will be good if you can just put in line the various suggestions that have come forth and how you think it will be useful in taking your research forward.
So something that came up very common in across the panel is the interactions with the ground level, with the community, and this is something that also goes back to the research that we are doing, where we're trying to look at what is actually happening at the ground level. Secondly, the importance of models or the limitations of models and how to take them ahead with the work and to inform us better is another crucial point that came up. Then the focus on communicating with stakeholders in the which is not just the government but also with the end users, etc., is critical, and to know what to communicate. You mentioned about, Somayo mentioned about the messaging, right? One is to accept that there is climate change is happening, but then to, also to accept it and then take it forward to go towards a more solutions-based approach is something that we should all look forward to. With it,
yeah. Thank you so much for this enriching discussions, and I think we can take a few questions if there are some. I mean, it has already been a very elaborative and extensive discussion, and this is what we intended to do with such as expertise that we could have on a panel. If there are any questions, I would encourage the audience here to ask. Yes, Victor.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That was really a wonderful discussion. And I just want to pick on something that Anik said, and I think Professor Babel also mentioned, and this is that, there's a big gap between research and implementation, right? And I used to be a researcher when I was working with Professor Babel, for almost 5 years. And now I have moved to the other part, where I'm now more involved with implementation of of projects, of initiatives, of activities, so on and so forth. And I think one of the things I'm realizing, and this is of course open to discussion as well, is that research is not usually imagined with an implementation overview, right? So when I was doing research, we never imagined as an implementation. It was more to strengthen the body of literature, and to robustify the science around it. And it's now very recently, that the implementation focus has been coming in, right? So what I'm finding, what kind of works best with the implementation is you need solutions which are scientifically robust, but not necessarily scientifically elaborate, right? So the fancy equations, those wonderful models and all, they're great. But I think what implementation, and because I work a lot with decision makers, this is exactly what they want. They want something that is grounded in science, right? But they also want something that is, that is doable, right? Which will not take too long to kind of to roll away, right? So there's just a thought that came to mind when I thought, I think what Anik had just mentioned.
Yeah, please. Reflections.
So true, my friend. We are doing a project in the Philippines, and we are doing research, evidence-based. We are developing a sustainable service platform. Our funding agency has told us, don't go and work with the farmers. That will be a complete failure. There should be implementing body, agricultural extension workers. You work with them, yeah? And they know, they have been working with the farmers for years. If you can convince them, they can convince them. Otherwise, we don't have the skills to work with them in many cases. That's our honest thing. It may not be always the case, but in my case, it is. Yeah.
No, actually, the point is that mechanism may be different. Mechanism may be through agriculture extension, mechanism may be through water user associations. But the point is that we should be seeing that research has got a relation with the reality. That's it. Yes.
Can we just ask the online panelists if they would like to comment on the previous the impression which was shared by one of the participants? Okay.
Yes, if I may to make a comment,
Yeah.
that is a big problem in the academia. People in academia tend to modify reality to fit into the modeling, or into the paper you want to write, or the project for which you have funding. And at the end, one is surprised that it's of no use. Of course, it was never going to be of any use because it was not planned to be made of any use. We in the universities have, I think, have developed for a long time in silos. And they have to come out of this because there is responsibility with society, because universities are public and are paid with taxpayers' money, or simply because you want to see your research applied, like in the case of Singapore. But I think that is a big problem in academia, the detachment from reality.
Yeah, thanks for your observations. Elena, you want to ask?
Yeah, I think it's building on the previous common question, which I couldn't agree more with, and I think, in fact, this is actually going to be the challenge as we move forward. So I think the question is, if we put our science hat on, how can we actually tap on all that evidence that exists, that is incredibly distributed and has a huge value from local communities, that are at the forefront of, in this case, climate change impacts, or managing water, or struggling with water quality, with drought, with floods, you name it. And I was just going through my mind about digital tools. I'm thinking, we're at the stage where you could have I can have this. I know nothing about how it works behind, and yet I can interact, and all my knowledge and all my thinking is kind of able to interact with the phone. And I think that's where, as scientists, it's our role to make it easier for them to share their knowledge with us, and not for us to impose our way of, it has to be systematic, it has to be hypothesis-driven. It's just not going to work. So I think I would love to have kind of comments and suggestions on how we gather this evidence and how we make it easier for them to share all their knowledge with us, because we actually need it. Probably more than they need ours. Well, or no, that's not quite true. But I mean, it's a dialogue, really. That's in a way, and it's a one-way system at the moment. It's not a dialogue.
I think this is more of an observation, but still, if the panel wants to, kind of respond to it.
Just one liner. So one thing is that, for scientists, we are sometimes too much obsessed understanding the state of the resource. Yeah. And when I'm dealing with the policymakers, real policymakers and regulators, they don't care about the state. They care about the consequences. They care about the impacts. And that's where the translation needs to be. And where implementation organization, think tanks like that, they can translate it very nicely on the state to consequences. And in consequences, it can be in terms of well-being, livelihood impacts, it can be in terms of dollar amounts, it can be in terms of investment opportunities, and so on, so on. So science has a big role to play, but the last keyword I want to say is partnership is very, very key. And we should not, the scientists should not just take all the roles and we can do everything. We cannot do many things. We can do a tiny part of it. And where we need partnerships, which is very, very key.
Thank you.
I think you have taken my words. The simple is that, if everyone plays their role, I don't want to underscore the value of science. Science, scientists, equations, models, they are all important. As you rightly said, that this mobile phone, right? You know how to use it. But how much research has gone into making it? We must appreciate that. So we should be appreciating others. I always try to say that all disciplines, stakeholders, sectors are important. And if we can appreciate others, then I think things would move with the help of partnerships. Thank you.
We would like to have, okay, yes, please.
Very short. I'm not totally agree with the point you said that we should try to understand what scientists saying. I think with a very small change in our academic system, we really can, as a professor said, root our research in something that's much more applicable for people. At the moment, our research academic system is like publishing paper, otherwise you cannot survive. I remember my postdoc time, I had to only publish, and I didn't have time to think, okay, who will read this and how we can implement that. There are only 1-2 university, very recently Utrecht University in Netherlands, I see, that they not only value on publication, but also value on the application of what research you did. I really think that our academic system should change also in this direction and consider this more. We shouldn't just put all blame on the.
Well, that's very.
Actually, many universities are now changing. I can tell you, universities are changing, and let me talk about Asian Institute of Technology. We have been discussing this for last 5 years, and now there is a change. We are evaluated every 2 years, right? And now I see there is a KPI related to impact. Now the problem comes, how do you really quantify it? So now we are thinking, so this is the point at this time, the impact part is subjectively, or not subjective is not the right word, is like, qualitatively assessed at this time. So we are struggling there. So the papers are important. I publish a lot of paper. I can tell you the importance of the paper also. Unless you do this paper, you would not have a technology, you would not have a tool to give it to the farmers or to the whoever it is. So everything has its own value, and we again I come back to the same point, we must respect that. You still need, you know, I tell you an example. One of the professor who was given this Nobel Prize for what? Nobel Prize for medicine or something, few years ago, a Japanese professor. So he was visiting India and he observed that people keep fasting. So he started analyzing why people do fasting, what are the consequences, and he found this autophagy, right? You must have heard. And he was given a Nobel Prize. So try to understand how he thought of an issue, found a solution, and a recommendation that how autophagy, how fasting can help you.
Thanks,
So,
Professor Babel. I think
he spent 20 years.
Yeah.
He spent 20 years. So research is required.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we have overshot the session time by 8 minutes. I no longer see the online panelists. I mean, are they still there? Yeah.
One is here, one has left.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I think I thought of concluding the session, but I don't think there is a need to conclude it. We at CW now has a clear-cut, kind of understanding, at least from this session, that in which direction we have to move and where we need to develop more partnerships. And please feel free to write to us. We will anyway be writing to you. So with this, I would like to thank all the panelists here who really, I think, enriched this discussion. Then special thank to Henriette. I know you wanted to come, but maybe next time we will meet you in person. And I think Professor Cecilia has already left, or maybe she might have some other obligation. And thank you to the participants, to the audience, and Elena, we will also be in contact with you, especially on your suggestion regarding how to make technology more adaptive or more useful to the end users. With this, thank you so much again, and we look forward to meeting you in the next Water Security Conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, bye, Henriette.